So I started talking with other Asian artists in the industry, and we started, talking about what it would mean to help our industry, how we could help artists that are coming after us that have yet to walk through that door, and what it would mean to create a platform that that was encouraging change for the right reasons.
Something broke in opera where the financials just became the sole purpose of doing anything. And that's maybe where Rudolph Bing's quote was coming from. Um, Companies are sacrificing so much artistic integrity for financial benefit. They can say, look at what we're doing. Look at the scope that we're encompassing. Come support us. Look at the good initiatives that we have. They can say that. Um, they have to make money.
Opera is dying, opera is dead. No, opera just needs to transform and change.
Nothing could replace the art of live involvements. In that sense, a movie could not create the experience of watching something live on stage. Um, when you look at movie creators spend so much millions of dollars try to create a what do they call a 3D IMAX movie that you have to wear a gaggle in order to feel real. Just go to any theater, ancient Greek theater, ancient Chinese theater, um, a lot of live performance that will give you the realness that you don't have to wear glass to see.
These days in Europe and in North America, we talk about the aging population of our audience. But in Asia, specifically in China, South Korea, and Japan, the typical opera goers are most of the opera goers are under age of 40. They see opera as very relevant and exciting, innovative like art form.
Whenever I go back to Korea, and I've sung opera in Korea a few times, it's also Japan and China too. I think opera is considered as a high art form, and they have a lot of respect for this art form. And I'm very happy to see this trend. But in my home country, Korea, opera is thriving. There are more opera companies every year, it seems like, and they do a lot of performances and productions. And young people like to learn this art form.
I mean, when I was in Shanghai, when I was in college in Shanghai, it's always popular. I mean, if I go to an opera, it's always almost full house.
You see opera halls going up like mad all over Asia. We're really, there's this huge influx of talent and inspiration. And I think it's just the beginning in sort of harvesting what will be a new generation of artists that will shape the field.
Most importantly, more presence in leadership for Asian American leadership roles in opera.
In the creative staff, the people making production decisions.
I am primarily focused in my artistic administration path with how are we represented on the stage in creatives and whatnot. But until that also happens on the other side, on the unseen side, the side that the people in the audience don't see, I don't think that we're going to see the kind of shifts we're all looking for in terms of that broader dialogue.
But again, with the caveat being that whoever is in that role needs to be studied and needs to be obviously qualified, because it is a hard door to open. And if we send people that are uneducated in there, it does us so much damage.
At the heart of what we do in opera, it is honoring people and honoring people's stories. If opera's superpower is bringing together all of the elements, music, both sung and instruments, story, fashion in the costumes that we have, architecture in the scenery, and in engaging audiences in that really multi-sensory experience, then I think as cultural service organizations, opera have a responsibility to expand the stories they tell and to increase the respect with which they tell those stories.
People like to rag on canonical repertoire a lot. And I don't see how I could join that. fray. If I didn't love the operas, the ones that already have existed for centuries, I wouldn't produce them. I love new operas too, of course, but I love Salome. I mean, it's one of my favorite things in all of life. And The Marriage of Figaro also is like one of m- m- my most cherished experiences is watching that opera. So I think abandoning the repertoire is a mistake. We love these pieces because they are very deep wells that you can come back to time and again, and they reveal something about not about them, but about you, you know? It's different to watch Madame Butterfly after you're a mom.
That's
It's
true.
different when that little boy comes out. It's
Mhm.
different. So that's why we come back to them. And I think it's incumbent on those of us who work in the field to mine them for all of the truth within them, because if there may be many people in the audience that if they see the powdered wig thing, they just like can't go there, right? They don't
Yeah.
understand, what am I watching? It's already in Italian. It's already, very long. It's already like I already didn't
I mean,
time
they're
when I
reading the subtitles and then having to
right,
like they're
right.
doing things
And
that
there may have been a time in public schools where we would have been exposed to, through Bugs Bunny or school through, we kind of have an understanding, oh, I know this tune, I've heard this. That may not be the case for kids today. We're now in the second generation of a real decline in arts education in public schools. So yeah, it's more important that we get creative with unlocking the stories and that we retain our belief in them. And for me, I have never been hung up on the identity of the creators. It's like, if you can't see and hear that Mozart is calling for revolution, and calling for a huge disruption of the social order, then you're not seeing the same piece I'm seeing. And that means that I need to work harder to make sure you understand what's at stake in this piece, which is that what he was observing around sexual politics and the droit de seigneur, which is the right of the landowner to have sex with any woman in his domain, that was a cruel injustice. And the piece is about that. And we see that today. We see in Harvey Weinstein and a million other stories of Diddy is on trial right now, that these dynamics around sexual politics repeat. And so, yeah, the urgency for The Marriage of Figaro is there today.
So, this is how we reckon with stories that we've inherited. This is how we engage with communities today. We're using these stories to bring people closer together. And sometimes that means really embracing competing narratives, holding things that we haven't done well in opera in the past, and doing our best with what we know now to reconcile, to reckon, to decolonize, and all of those kinds of things.
So I love that challenge of figuring out how do we make these Eurocentric works that might be a little bit problematic, a little bit racist, a little bit sexist, a little bit anti-Semitic, a little bit whateverist, but also retain some value. Maybe it's beautiful music or beautiful choreography or something sublime that speaks to the human spirit that's worth doing for this contemporary moment that would have a resonance in this moment. If it doesn't have a resonance for this moment, there's no point in doing it, right? It has to be contemporary art. But then you have to ask yourself, what else could it be? That's my favorite creative prompt as an artist. What else could it be? It's so generative.
I'm so glad that people are having more discussions now to dive into that before people actually try and produce those kinds of operas, so that we are a little more informed and more respectful about how we are going to produce them. We weren't having diversity conversations when I was coming up in opera. This was all something that I just took for granted as the universe I was diving into. I'm so glad we don't have to do that anymore.
I only have one lived experience that is my own. And so both the great joy and the great privilege of my work engaging with people from around the world is that I get to learn and enjoy their lived experience as well. And so I think that goes for everybody. Opera is a mirror of society, and I think there are many folks like myself who care deeply about minimizing, getting rid of all bias in what we do. Again, because our most noble purpose is to bring people together to share stories that are timeless stories about the human condition, the things that, the elements of our lives that make each of us unique, and the things that we share as human beings. And the great thing about the arts, right, is that it's beautiful and imperfect. I consider it my responsibility to use my privilege and my platform to make opera a better place for everyone.
Well, I think the end goal for everyone is that we live in a post-racial world where, yes, Asian stories are being told. Our cultures, so many, because we all have so many different cultures within just our community.
Bringing to light relevant current stories that people can potentially see themselves in, be inspired by, be drawn to, and see how they can relate to that and relate to their own humanity.
That aren't just focused on the traumatic aspect.
Not just make sad stories, not just lean on stories from antiquity, but make new stories. Tell comedies, not just about immigration or how hard it is or anything about dragons and phoenixes, but like stories about getting pregnant, stories about losing family, stories about cross-cultural marriages, stories about applying to college. We need just normal Asian American stories to also be part of the canon.
And not doing their work out of tokenization's sake, but doing their work because it is worthy and deserves to be heard.
First of all, we need to raise awareness of, hey, you know what? Opera stories are so vast. We have Asian American stories to tell. And also, I think, back to the simple question of what is American opera? What does American opera include and tell, right? So I would say American opera, first of all, subject matters. It should have all kinds of subjects from different communities, and by and created by different creators from that community. And that actually makes American opera so unique. And I think even more so than maybe some other countries, because of how how a country is created and coming together. So I do feel that we are all doing our share to create the American opera canon. And with that, I think it needs, visionaries as the general directors, the programming person from different venue, different opera house, different festival, to see if you only tell one kind of story, only presenting one kind of artist, one kind of one set of performers, and that is great, but that is not the complete picture of what America is about. So I think that there should be more people to commission operas, not just from Asian American community, but from different communities, because there's great stories out there needs to be told, need to be heard. But of course, we need to have artists who can tell those stories first.
I find it so meaningful to have new stories for opera. I really feel that, like any art form that's reacting to the moment, and making sense of the moment, opera should do that too. And I think opera should, if we want this to be an American art form, it should look like America. It should be representing America. And what I've seen with the new works is that new people kind of try it out. There is a movement in opera with new stories, and things are happening, and I think that's caught on. People will always love the canon, and that's great too. That's beautiful. That's the tradition, but art should always be evolving and doing new things and stretching. And I think when you do that, you're going to find new audiences. It is a different thing to see yourself represented, or your history, or your family's story. That is different.
Oftentimes, they're not told on the main stage, they're told second stage.
Would be nice to see them programmed by bigger opera houses too.
The repertoire needs to be diverse. Because if you start specifying in one direction, like you said, everything becomes a catch-22. Everything becomes an us versus them. If you do an Asian canon opera, Asian specific opera, and you start just trying to cast Asians in it, then again, it alienates so many people. It alienates a lot of the audience as well. Audience don't want to be yelled at saying, why are we being alienated? Why are we being yelled at? You know, it does a disservice to all of them, all of these people who've been fighting on both sides to actually make this a more diverse art form.
This wedding banquet is all Asian story. Once it's premiered with all Asian casting or appropriate casting or whatever, after that, my wish is to open to non-Asians to sing this too. So it becomes the next Othello, it becomes next Aida. Otherwise, it will just be wedding banquet for Asian singers only. Huang Lu's opera, other Dr. Sun Yat-sen, I think in Vancouver, they cast the non-Asian singers to sing this opera in Chinese language, right? That's great. You know, in all diverse and also exchanged culture. And that's the power and beauty of this genre.
We're better together.
I've been in this art form and industry for over 2 decades now, and it's changed a lot. And I have to say, from at least anecdotally to my eye, it seems like it has the representation of different people, different kinds of peoples, has increased marginally. I'd like to see more of that.
It's our responsibility to even the scales and really fight for the equity that our art form deserves, as do our audiences.
Representation is a thing.
Well, my dream representation would be that we would see more Asian identifying performers on stages and, in the pit and everywhere. And that there wouldn't be the caveat of, well, you're here because we are trying to be inclusive, or we are trying to make a point of being XYZ or have
Right.
a YZ intention.
The whole just diversity hire can be so problematic.
Right.
But it is necessary, and it's such a tough needle to thread.
I feel so grateful to have this career singing this role so many times, but also it has been a pigeonhole that I couldn't get out of for many, many years. I wanted to sing other roles as well.
Again, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? I love that stories of people that look like me are being told, but also like I think there's so much more than me than just how I look. There are other stories in the canons I do want to tell still.
When I started out in 90s, I started out singing something else. My very first opera was Suor Angelica by Puccini, and then Mimi in La Boheme, Michaela and Marguerite, and all other, regular roles. But then once I started singing Butterfly, it has been Butterfly only. But to me, I feel that change came in maybe early 2000, if I may say, because when I started out, I feel there were not enough Asian singers just to cast for Butterfly or to cast all Asian singers for their, Butterfly productions. But I think have become more and more Asian singers available to be cast. And then this casting directors had this luxury of having all Asian singers sing this opera, or Asian singers singing only this opera. So that kind of trend has started later, and it has been bad for younger generation, like even younger than I am generations, that they couldn't even do other roles before they started Butterfly. For me, at least, I had 10 years of my career singing other things until I was stuck with this opera. But I think young singers feel more than that from the starting point. I know there are more Asian composers wanting to bring more Asian stories, so more Asian singers can be cast. But we have to be careful with that trend because then we are making our own limits again. Then we're going to cast only Asian singers sing those stories. So, I mean, again, unless it is really, really important to have the racial differentiation in the casting, even if it is an Asian story, we should be open. We should open to casting and make it more diverse. I believe that's my wish because otherwise we're creating another pigeonhole, for Asian singers.
So I just think there's a lot of sort of muddy area right now around how opera engages with race in casting and what the rationale behind it is. Is it about a lived personal experience that an actor brings to a role? Is it about the visual verisimilitude, so like to the audience you look enough like that role, or is it about generally creating equity for people of color in the industry to be able to have the same career opportunities that white people have had for a very long time? The last one is the most important one to me, and I feel like that one is solved the best when we don't just focus on casting people of color in pieces that are specifically written for people of color, but look at diversity on a much broader scale.
So there's three types of casting that I think we think about in opera. The first is colorblind casting, where it doesn't matter your race, it's just the voice matters. But then often we still have our own biases, right? So that often is a way to say, well, we tried to look for an Asian singer who had a voice that was big enough to sing in our house, but we couldn't, and that's why we had to cast a white woman, right? Even though it's an Asian character in the role. The pitfalls of colorful casting, which is saying, oh, well, if she's an East Asian character, then we need to find an East Asian presenting singer. Then you have this pigeonholing and typecasting where Asian singers then just sing Butterfly and Turandot, which are not even operas written by Asian people. Those are white people fantasies of Asian people, but then they aren't invited back to sing Traviata or Bohème or anything else because, oh, sorry, we already had you this season in the Oriental repertory, not Asian, Oriental, which is fantasy Asian repertory. So we don't need you for 2 gigs. We need to hire other singers. So thank you very much. So then, okay, so that doesn't work either. And then the third way of casting is color conscious casting. So basically, what would happen if we cast against type? So what if we cast Madame Butterfly with an all black cast, except for Pinkerton, who was white? Well, but that's a conscious decision to use race. Or what if we cast it the other way, whereas an all white cast, but Pinkerton was black? What would that mean? So that again is another way. So you could cast different roles even within one opera in different ways, but just hopefully starting to think about some language about how we cast operas and the impact on Asian singers, just to be aware of that. So some ways to say is like, okay, we had you as an Asian singer come to sing Butterfly for us this season in the Oriental repertory. Next season, we not only want to invite you back to sing an Asian part by an Asian composer, but also, we're doing Valkyrie, we're doing Wagner, and I think you'd also be great. We're doing the Magic Flute. You would be fantastic and hilarious and cozy. Let's talk about what's good for you for next season as well. So that conversation, so it's not just thank you for your Cho-Cho-san. That's one way to engage a singer in a way that feels a little bit more equitable. If you want to go by certain color, racial casting ideas. So it's complicated, but that's the level of literacy you need to have if you are programming for a diverse 21st century audience and casting with diverse 21st century audiences, singers. This needs to be comfortable for you to know how to talk about this stuff with an ease and a comfort and a literacy. So that's the standard that we need to get to as a field.
I understand the importance of awareness. I understand that 100%. Obviously, I understand that 100%. However, I am one that I would never ever want to get a job just because I can check a box. You know, hire me because of my talent, or else don't hire me at all. Don't ever put lipstick on a pig for me, and
Right now at the Met, Korean tenor is singing Pinkerton, beautiful, and a Puerto Rican soprano is singing Butterfly, beautiful. That's the only way we can be also open for other things. So the cast and directors are trying this and that. I hope it's not temporary. I hope that is done because they really see us as artists, not by our last names, right?
I sang so many butterflies with a white butterfly. I've sung it with a black soprano as butterfly. In so many casts, I was the only Asian in Butterfly. And that's the way it should be.
Those Asian singers feeling comfortable with their home culture, they should find the artistic culture more to be their home culture, right? I think this art form is interracial, intercultural.
And I would hope that in doing so, we will only increase the excellence of the art form, because we'll be truly listening for, quote unquote excellence. And we might start seeing people as individuals rather than just the color of their skin or how their last name is spelled. Particularly in America, we're such a multicultural place.
What I would like to see is just an acknowledgement that opera can be many different things. I think that one of the reasons that it has had such difficulty overcoming this issue of stereotyping and colorism and all of these other things is that there is a contingent that sees it as this fixed thing, right? That it comes from Europe and it's this one way of telling musical stories. And I don't think that that's all that it is. And in order for it to survive, it has to be allowed to evolve and change and reflect the people that are making it right now who have different stories and who don't look like the people who are making it, a couple hundred years ago. So that is the main thing that I would like to see is this greater flexibility around the stories, but also the people who are telling the stories and the ways that we're telling those stories. Like one thing that I find continually interesting, we'll say, is this emphasis on the piano score as part of the development process when a lot of musical cultures out there, rely really heavily on rhythmic structure and percussion, and there's no place for that in a piano reduction. So already you're kind of like making this line between what is acceptable and what isn't, just in the very way that you're developing the work. Like, if I were to take a piece that was, I mean, even with Indian music, there's so much about the rhythmic cycles and the percussion that you can't capture with a piano. So you can't really hear it until you get to the orchestra reading because you're not allowed to put that part of it in the beginning. This is very nerdy tangent, but I think it's just about, making processes that allow for these different ways of thinking about what music is and can be, which I don't think that we have right now.
I love writing opera, but also I love to breaking down the barriers of what defines this is opera, this is symphony, this is this or that. To me, at the end, it's all about connecting people, bringing people together to share. And so in the case of opera, we could do that.
What does it mean to rewrite the history of opera?
Well, I think this is the mission statement from Experiments in Opera, and it's to rewrite the story of opera, right? Which is what kind of stories are we telling and who can tell those stories? And so, what Experiments in Opera has done from the beginning, like even before I became involved, was to try and invite people in who are outside of the classical canon, right? So, the three founders of the company all studied jazz together at Wesleyan, and so that often would involve bringing in people from the jazz side But also they had Roddy Bottum, who who was like a in oh, what's the band? I think Faith No More is the name of the band. He was in a rock band. So he wrote an opera for them. So it's just been like a wide variety of different people from these different paths who are interested in opera. But how do you get into it if you come from a rock band or if you come from jazz? So this was a way in.
While I love culturally specific pieces, what I hope to do as a composer, I'm really inspired and energized by stories that, particularly stories that are like fantasy futurism, that can take us entirely outside of our paradigms around culture, country, race, etc., and build something entirely new where we can populate the stage with the most beautifully diverse casts and with characters that aren't attached to any kind of preconceived, either appropriated archetypes or even genuine portrayals, but like aren't rooted in any particular thing from our real world, and that can give performers the freedom to openly explore creating a brand new role that doesn't have any particular real world ties.
Because I work in a lot of different mediums, dramatic mediums, between stage and musicals and film, TV, and opera, I don't necessarily believe in the classification or the distinction between so-called high art and so-called popular art. And I would love there to be a new opera which then goes to Broadway or has some sort of commercial life. Broadway at the moment is very dependent on whether jukebox musicals or it's very, pop rock oriented. And art musicals in general are probably having a tougher time on Broadway now than they did, say, 10 years ago. That said, it still feels to me that at some point, opera, in the so-called golden age, was a popular medium. I'd like it, I think it can still be a popular medium today. Opera composers are now writing much more accessible music, um, certainly more so than when I started out, and there was still kind of a preference for serialism and 12 tone. Um, and that has its place too, of course, but makes me feel hopeful that one of these operas are going to catch on and some commercial producer is going to think, maybe I can make some money off of this.
Sometimes new opera can be easier to sell than traditional opera that people might have felt they've already seen enough. Other times, we know now a lot of newcomers to opera really do want to see the standards. So it's really an alchemical process by which we pay our bills in opera and bring this work to the stage. What I will say, when we did The Refuge in Houston, which was the very first project that told these stories in this way, we had $200,000 in the budget for the project. And because of the unique nature of the stories involved, because of the community relationships that we had built in a very reciprocal way, we raised an additional $1 million for for the 18-month-long project that served more than 230,000 people all over Houston. And that money that we raised, that extra $1 million, came from sources of funding that would never have supported anything else the opera was doing. It is key that an opera company can stay in business, lights, photocopiers, rehearsal time, buildings, all of those things. And so what I found, generally speaking, is that when you broaden the stories you tell, that broadens and diversifies communities of support that go beyond money as well.
We have woefully neglected best practices around marketing, around data collection, around just making informed choices in prioritizing external communications. We don't have record labels anymore. We don't have, the Texaco radio hour anymore. We don't have, and as those things have fallen away, we've been like, well, that's too bad, instead of picking up the responsibility to fill that gap, right? And so how can we expect to welcome a new generation of audience members if they've never heard of opera or they have no idea we exist? And who exactly is going to do that if not us ourselves, right? So one of the first things I did at Houston was to hire a leader who had come from a career in professional sports. She had been at the NBA and at the NFL, never worked in the arts, but just brought tremendous experience, expertise in how you handle the tailgate experience, which we call guest experience, how you work with ticketing, how you make digital product, how you create brand awareness. And there's a science to it. And we have really, I think, for far too long thought if the art is good, if the singing is good, if the quality of what we're producing on stage has merit, then we've done our job. And that's not the job anymore. The job is not that. The mission is to enrich the community through the art of opera. We have to make sure that the community is better off because there's an opera company there than if there was no opera company. And that question of civic value and of really doing the hard work of being the bridge between the stage and the community, that to me is the work today.